islands we visited were very remote and a long way from any population centres. And that's part of the attraction for us to go there, is firstly we can use these islands and with fairly natural marine communities to compare with the Kermadec Islands, and they are very natural marine communities, but also we want to go to places that are relatively untouched, that aren't impacted by pollution, for example, or high impacts of fishing. Again, to compare the populations and the abundances of the big predators with what we see at the Kermadec Islands as well. That we had an expectation that some of these remote islands we were visiting in would have much larger densities of sharks than they did, knowing that they were remote, sometimes unpopulated, that they would not have been fished. However, the reality is that they have been fished, possibly by overseas, foreign fleets. We don't know. We don't know the history of the fishing pressure, but certainly the number of sharks that we saw around the reefs was lower than we expected. Sharks are usually a measure of how much fishing pressure there has been, because historically there were lots of sharks around coral reefs, around these coral reefs, and we don't know when they disappeared, when they've been fished, but we were surprised how few we saw, which is quite disappointing. And we didn't observe many big sharks anywhere we went either. Similarly, some of the larger reef fishes like the gropers and the snappers and things like that, where in an unfished area see reasonable numbers of them, never large numbers but reasonable numbers of them, they were also tended to be very low numbers or not at all observed, and it wasn't until we got deeper or at very remote areas of islands, parts of islands, that we would see anything like a large groper or a snapper. So I think the reality is, and it's a sort of bellwether for what's happening around the world, fishing is occurring everywhere pretty well, and there's very few places left where the impacts of fishing aren't having an impact on the communities that you see around the reefs. And I'm pleased to say that Rangitahua, the Kermadec Islands, are one of those few places left in the world. Some of the surprise and highlights include, well, the whales are always a highlight and a surprise because you never know when they're going to appear, but some of the islands we visited in Fiji, for example, had a mother and calf, and the calves were as small as they're known to get. So these lagoons that we visited may be birthing areas, for example, for these whales. So these calves may have only been days old, and that's really neat to see that, and also get an opportunity to observe that underwater. The minke whale that just hung around, wanted some company from something a bit bigger. That was really neat, and certainly, when we go to these islands, we have an expectation of what we're going to see. I work on fish, and I have an expectation of the range of fish we see. But sometimes we see things we don't expect, things that are known from nearby areas, say, for example, things that we know occur in New Caledonia being seen for the first time in Fiji, or tropical species that have never been recorded at the Kermadec Islands before. That's always a treat. But the big one, the sort of the money shot, is the one where we see or catch species that have never been recorded before. These are new species that haven't been described yet, and we did come across some of those at some of the islands we came to. There's a few species of fish that look different, maybe new species, or just maybe a different colour form of a known species, but we know for sure that we have collected some species that are new to science, and that's always exciting. When you get down to the invertebrates, the things without backbones, like shells, crabs and things like that, there's definitely new species among those, but they will take a while to work up by specialists from around the world to confirm whether they're new or not. That's why I keep doing it, because it is exciting. It's sort of like, I sort of describe these as voyages of discovery, because they're areas that haven't been visited very often. So when we do go there, we know we're going to see new things. And so part of our role is to recommend, say, to these islands, saying, look, these habitats that we've seen are unusual, and they really should be preserved. For example, one area we went to in the southern Lau Islands of Fiji, there was limestone reefs that have been lifted up, so they're not coral anymore, but they're dead coral reefs that have been lifted up. And then beside that, you'll have channels of water with sand mangroves growing out of that, with their prop roots sticking up out of the water, and at the base of that there's seagrass, beautiful crystal clear water, and popping up out of the seagrass is coral reefs. That mix of mangroves, seagrass, coral reefs in one area is very unusual anywhere, and so that's sort of something we'd say that's an area you should protect, because you don't get that complex and mix of habitats in many places anywhere in the world. So that's really, really cool that we can have that influence and help decision makers make decisions that'll benefit the communities that live there, the marine communities that live there.